Welcome to another installment of Sherlocktober. Today I'm going to be talking about the two current TV versions of Sherlock Holmes that either seem to be equally appreciated or at bloody war with each other. You have no idea how much I wish I had a deerstalker cap right now. I'd put it on just so I could toss it off with a reference of a death frisbee. I mean, the closest thing I've got are these two hats, and maybe if I put them together it might kind of resemble a deerstalker. I mean, it's got two fronts. In my opinion, these are two great shows. I love them both for different reasons. Sherlock is the ultimate honest representation of the original canon material, with the small exception that it's set in the modern era. The shift in time period is perfectly mastered and so seamlessly integrated into the stories that I forget it was not intended for the 21st century. Now, Elementary is another creature entirely. This is a completely different representation. I don't know that I would say it's any less honest than from another perspective. It doesn't follow the canon as closely, obviously. I mean, they made Watson a woman. But I think it tackled the side of Sherlock Holmes that fans craved. A more human side. And I realize that Sherlock Holmes is not some insensitive monster, but I think sometimes even hardcore fans want to see a little more emotion and emotional distress on a regular basis from the great detective. I could be wrong, but this is the reason I absolutely love the unique perspective provided by Elementary, because they have pushed Sherlock off the edge, and this is all about watching him climb back up from that and growing from it. I loved the fact that they put him through rehab and that he's a recovering addict, because it lines up with the canon in a modern sense, but it's tackled in a way that no one else has done before. It's a what-if scenario, and it is so much fun to watch. This isn't exactly a comparison, it's more of a look at some of my favorite elements from each show. I love both of these characters. First off, John is just adorable. It is literally the best word to describe him. He is like a loyal, lovable, devoted little puppy, and his strength lies in his silence. He is strong and dependable and reliable, and he has always been the guy carrying the gun when Sherlock needs backup. Don't believe me? Just read the canon. Joan, on the other hand, is a different kind of strong. Emotionally strong is, I think, the best way to put it. She is quite literally placed into the story as an emotional navigator for this depressed Sherlock. I also love that Joan doesn't put up with Sherlock's crap. She just doesn't. John tries to keep him in check in public and when he's being incredibly insensitive, but for the most part he just lets it slide because that's just the way Sherlock is. And I love that Joan holds Sherlock accountable for the things that he says and he does. Also, making Watson a woman, and Lucy Liu no less, not only shakes up the norm, but adds a completely new and interesting component to the story. In Sherlock, he is, again, the literal version of Sherlock Holmes. He is often, usually, pretty much always, insensitive. You have to admit, that's part of what we love about Sherlock. Sometimes we just like to watch jerks in television because it's amusing on TV, even though you would want to punch them in real life. And I'm sure that's really healthy, guys. I have noticed that while Elementary Sherlock takes great pride in insulting clients, suspects, and occasionally colleagues, he never insults, to my memory, Captain Gregson or Joan Watson. This is an interesting contrast. In Sherlock, even if he doesn't mean them as insults, Sherlock insults Watson a lot. And when he insults Lestrade, it's entirely intentional. In Elementary, Sherlock can be annoying and he presses people's buttons, but he is not nearly as downright nasty as the BBC version can be. Again, I think this goes back to this portrayal being more human and more approachable. He retains many Sherlock qualities, but this version of Sherlock has hit rock bottom. So we get to see how he conquers that and how he comes away from that a different person. The parallel for this in Sherlock will be his return in Series 3. I am very excited to see how they pull this off, because it's not like Sherlock can just waltz back in and, I don't know, start insulting people again and it will all just go back to normal. There is no way that Watson and Lestrade and Mrs. Hudson are going to go for that. So I am very intrigued with how Sherlock has developed in his absence and how he will handle his whole coming back from the dead thing, especially with John. Sherlock's version wins hands down. She is one tough old bird, even if she doesn't look it. In Scandal in Belgravia, men break in, take her by force, and she still manages to keep what they're looking for out of their hands and keep her mouth shut while they try to beat it out of her. There are indications that she was abused by her late husband, but instead of making her seem weak and vulnerable, this strengthens her character. Plus, I love the fact that she gives everyone lip, especially Sherlock. It isn't just that her character is great, but that she adds another layer to life at 221B, and to Sherlock and John, not seen in Elementary. This is a third person who not only adds to the interesting dimensions of the dynamic duo without feeling like an outsider or a third wheel, but she transforms the pair from friends and colleagues to a misfit family. My favorite example of this is when Mycroft is visiting the flat and he tells Mrs. Hudson to shut up. John and Sherlock both snap at him in the same instant, and the look on Mycroft's face is priceless because he's just crossed this line he didn't even know existed. Okay, confession. I'm not actually going to talk about these characters, but I knew you would want to know why they weren't going to be mentioned. See, I'm not actually caught up on Elementary. I haven't seen the Season 1 finale yet, or any of Season 2, so I don't really know what's going on with these characters, per se, with the obvious exception of the internet spoilers I have seen, and let's just say I hate spoilers. On the whole, it's not that I prefer one show above the other, it's that at any time I can be in the mood for either. I like both versions, and it's hard for me to pick a favorite because there are so many elements in each that I absolutely love. So for me, I'm just going to keep watching and enjoying both. One more thing, and this is more of a side note because I'm not really sure where it would relate in my discussion, but I found something interesting online. There is a moment in A Study in Pink when Anderson accuses Sherlock of being a psychopath, and Sherlock retorts, "I'm not a psychopath, I'm a high-functioning sociopath, do your research." There is a blog post on the Mary Sue, and you can find the link here or below. Apparently a psychologist is kind of pitching a fit about this because a psychopath and a sociopath is the same thing. Apparently there is no actual difference between them. It's two different terms for the same condition. You can read it for yourself. It's kind of interesting, but it's really the discussion that got started in the comments that Sherlockians really need to read. Someone pointed out that if Sherlock were a true sociopath, the events of Reichenbach would not have occurred because Sherlock would not have had those emotional attachments. The commenter proposed that Sherlock's claim to be a sociopath is more like a shield, as protection against emotion rather than the absence of it. And someone else mentions that perhaps it's possible Sherlock wishes he were a sociopath to be free of emotion. It really is a great little discussion, and major feels abound, so definitely check it out. That's all for today, me loverlies. I hope everyone's having a great Sherlocktober, no matter what you're reading. Next week, I'll have a review for Dust and Shadow by Lindsay Fay, and I am really enjoying this so far. In the meantime, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on the different shows and their representations, and don't forget to like and subscribe.